Greetings and salutations. I am at Darjeeling Zen, and I am responding to a post titled Libertarianism is an Ideology Built on Neoclassical Economics, which may be found at unlearningeconomics.wordpress.com. And to respond to Moira's reply, perhaps I have, not quite made myself clear, as I am perceiving an impression that perhaps my position has been misunderstood. To be clear, it is not my position that, quote, government by consent is a contract, close quote. Rather, I argue that the meaning of the phrase implicit in Moira's use of it seems, at least, to imply a hidden premise of previous consent of individuals, which perhaps comes in the form of some kind of contract theory. The arguments that followed in my previous discussion demonstrates why this presupposed contract would in no way conform to any other kind of contract that we might approve of in law. That is, the contract is non-producible, it has no signatories, it has unequal parties, any consent must be considered as under duress. Consent is assumed or presumed by mere birth. There is no admittance of a impartial third party to arbitrate, etc., etc. A FUBAR contract, if we may permit the expression. And this contract could in no way, of course, serve as any kind of legitimate agreement between parties. And the Magna Carta, the Constitution, the king as a feudal overlord and theocratic ruler, as Moira explains, are all representations of the same hidden premise, that some should rule and others should be ruled, and of course to a lesser or a greater extent, of course. But it is my position that there has never been any legitimate consent for any of it. And really, if you think about it, how could there be? Why would anyone consent to be ruled? And even if one did decide to be ruled, why would they not put their dominion under auction to get the best possible ruler under, under negotiations for terms at the best price, to get the best security for the lowest possible price? Why would, and even if we accept this, why would even this indentured servitude be necessary? If the ruler was ever supposed to be providing a service called security, why commit forever? Why not negotiate on a yearly basis with mercenary companies or perhaps various private security firms? Why commit to one ruler indefinitely? Why the patriotic propaganda? Why the requirement that some religious notion justifies the rule of the ruler? Why the need to falsely justify such as couched in the terms of a rational ethic, such as consent to the governed, close quote, unless the entire program is truly one of rulership backed by force, taking the form not of consent of the governed, but of coercion of the ruled. And these various means of propaganda are instituted to create cognitive dissonance in the feeble-minded. As Thoreau has written, quote, must the citizen ever for a moment or in the least degree resign his conscience to the legislator? Why has every man a conscience then? I think we should be men first and subjects afterward. It is not desirable to cultivate a respect for the law so much as for the right. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right." Close quote. And I am actually very pleased with Moira's statement, quote, "Any party to the contract can decide there is a breach," close quote, as this could be interpreted as a quite admirable stand for ethics and human rights. I just hope that the assumption of the contract, whose terms are simply bare assertions at best, does not then imply that individuals who claim a breach of this apparition of a contract are then presumed to be due some punishment or forced removal from some arbitrary geographic borders. For it should not be individuals who claim breach of the supposed contract that should have to be responsible for damages, but for if any party has, a right of compensation, it might be the reverse. I am reminded of a letter by J.W. Loguen, which I believe is quite appropriate as a capstone to the topics we've discussed thus far. Loguen has escaped slavery and lived in Syracuse for a while his memoir of his days in slavery has come to the attention of his former master's widowed wife, who has sent him a request for $1,000 of compensation for his escape to freedom. Logan's reply to her was printed in the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. Quote, "Miss Sarah Logan, you say you have offers to buy me, and that you shall sell me if I do not send you $1,000. And in the same breath, you almost in the same sentence, you say, you know we raised you as we did our own children. Woman, did you raise your own children for the market? Did you raise them for the whipping post? Did you raise them to be driven off, bound in a coffle and chains? Shame on you. But you say, I am a thief, because I took the old mare along with me. Have you got to learn that I had the better right to the old mare, as you call her, than the Massa Logan had to me? Is it a greater sin for me to steal his horse than it was for him to rob my mother's cradle and steal me? Have you got to learn that human rights are mutual and reciprocal, and if you take my liberty and life, you forfeit your own liberty and life? Before God and high heaven, is there a law for one man which is not a law for every other man? If you or any other speculator on my body and rights wish to know how I regard my rights, they need but come here and lay their hands on me to enslave me. Yours, etc., J. W. Logan. Close quote. So to Moira's new questions. Quote, to what extent is this dichotomy translated into modern government? Close quote. And elsewhere, quote, to what extent are these same principles reflected through libertarianism and neoclassical economics? Close quote. I suppose I would respond, the dichotomy persists in modern government to the extent that the many are ruled by the few, who call themselves under various names of representative and agent, and the difference is now that the agents largely remain constant, but the representatives rotate around periodically. The consent of individuals who are governed is not really needed in such a system. as it is presumed or assumed by the mere or bare assertion of the ruling party, and the dismally deficient contract is enforced ultimately at the point of a gun. As Thoreau would write, quote, "The state never intentionally confronts a man's sense, intellectual or moral, but only his body, his senses. It is not armed with superior wit or honesty, but with superior physical strength. I was not born to be forced. I will breathe after my own fashion. Let us see who is the strongest." Close quote. So, to what extent are these same principles reflected through libertarianism and neoclassical economics? Well, I really want to be as kind as possible to Unlearning Econ, for in all our interactions, Unlearning Econ has been very gracious. But I must say that in my humble estimation, the connection is rather tenuous at best. Unlearning Econ seems focused on the relative similarities of the conclusions of both, that in Unlearning Econ's estimation, both conclude with the government is bad conclusion. Therefore, in Unlearning Econ's rationale, both must be equivalent. Yet it is my estimation that their premises differ significantly. And this is why I have attempted to discuss Unlearning Econ's thesis on the level of ethics, to show how, while I might come to a similar conclusion, yet I might differ from both or either. Unlearning Econ's true argument seems to me, at least, to be really that government is good. And this is a premise which I do not think that Unlearning Econ has, at least yet, made explicit or defended. Thank you so much for watching. This is Darjeeling Zen.